welcome back to another edition of the Here We Go podcast. I am your host, Trent Ging, and today I'm going to dive into a question. Can the Pittsburgh Steelers win without George Pickens, or is this Pickens or bust right now? So I'm going to start this premise based on what we saw in Philadelphia. So we had talked all year about the need for wide receiver help. And the only help has come in the form of Mike Williams. I think it's actually pretty easy to argue that Ben Skowronek has been a better addition to this team since coming back off IR than Mike Williams has. The targets aren't there for Williams. The snap count has been ramping up. He is not open. Pretty abundantly clear why Keenan Allen remained the number one receiver in LA, even when Williams was finding his footing and really having some success. He is what George Pickens was as a rookie, just not as good at it. He's a downfield threat who's good at getting the jump balls and playing the ball downfield in the air. He is not your everyday route runner who's going to separate at a high level. That's just not who he is. And so if we go into Baltimore this week, and we do not have George Pickens. If we go into Kansas City and we do not have George Pickens, how could we possibly win in either of those games? Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the Philadelphia Eagles are anything but the best pass defense in the NFL right now. That's exactly what they are, and that's exactly what they proved to be. But I'm also not going to pretend that this was some anomaly that guys like Scottie Miller and Calvin Austin and Mike Williams, Van Jefferson just could not get open. These guys haven't been getting open all season. Now, I think Calvin Austin has been a guy who's gotten open at a higher level than some of these other guys. But a lot of it is because George Pickens commands a lot of attention. He's finding holes in his zone when he's running downfield. He's playing out of the slot, so he's getting the third best corner. He was playing more on the outside this last game. So, of course, he's not getting the same separation as he is when he's coming out of the slot. I think as a fan base, our worst nightmares came true when George Pickens has this hamstring injury. He's too important to the team. He's the only legitimate playmaker who does not need scheme to get him open. Najee Harris needs the offensive line to open him up. Jaylen Warren needs the offensive line to open up his running lanes. Pat Freiermuth, I think he's been open more than he's gotten the ball. But a lot of his opportunities are coming once he is being designed open. But Freiermuth is the only other guy in the conversation, I think. But I'm not sure he's doing it at a high enough level to really consider him a playmaker right now. George Pickens, or bust, is very real right now in Pittsburgh. The questions coming into the year about him being a number one receiver, not a number one receiver, I think everything that you've seen on the field between the whistles has been answered pretty resounding. Like he is told the world he is not just a number one receiver, but he is a very high-end number one receiver. He's really good at what he does. And as the year has gone on, I know that this team has needed wide receiver help. I've talked about it to the point of exhaustion. But also, imagine what this guy could be if he had another threat on the field, where defenses didn't get to bracket him every single time and just worry about taking away Pickens. I mean, imagine if the Deontay Johnson, who was producing at a high level, was on the field and gave a second option for this offense. We just don't have it. I'm not sure this team can beat anyone, and I mean anyone, including Cincinnati, if George Pickens isn't a part of the offense right now. I mean, I'm not saying, and I was pretty clear on this, he does not help us beat Philadelphia. We were not going to beat that team. But with George Pickens, we've already beat the Baltimore Ravens. Without him, there is no reason for the Baltimore Ravens not to just run 8 and 9-man boxes all game long. We don't have anybody else who can beat them. I mean, that's pretty evident. Kansas City's got another really good defense. You're not going to beat Kansas City without him, especially if Mahomes is playing and he puts up points early. I mean, you fall behind and you got to throw the football. With the cast of characters that we have right now, it's just not going to work. Russell Wilson took some bad sacks, but where should he go with the football? I mean, he could try to throw one up and see what happens. But I would just say this. If you're okay with that, don't be upset if there's a turnover as a fan base. Because doing that time and time again throughout a game because you have nobody getting open and no separation, and the offensive line isn't holding up for 4 and 5 seconds, like that's unreasonable to even ask a young offensive line. He's going to make mistakes just throwing the ball into these tight windows eventually, so don't get upset if he throws a pick. Should we go get a guy like Odell Beckham Jr.? All indications out of Baltimore is that they're probably going to cut Deontay the day after the Steeler game. Hell, they might cut him as soon as the clock hits 0. I don't know. That just seems like a horrible situation. Should we even want Deontay back? After watching the game in Philadelphia, I'll be honest with you, I never thought there'd be a chance in hell this team would ever even consider bringing Deontay Johnson back into the mix. He's fought with Minka Fitzpatrick. He's fought with Mitchell Trubisky. It was very clear the organization tried to send a message to him by trading him to Carolina rather than finding the best deal. They really actually sent him to wide receiver purgatory. And now that it still can't work out with Lamar Jackson and a high-flying offense, and Baltimore doesn't have great receivers, Deontay should have been able to slip in there as their clear favorite number one receiver. The fact that it didn't work is a little bit interesting. Probably should raise some red flags. But the fact of the matter is you can't look at what just happened in Philadelphia and say, this guy wouldn't bring any value. I liked Deontay before all the attitude issues and the character. I thought when his contract situation was up, I thought he handled himself very well. He was very quiet. He kept coming to work. He kept doing his thing. He didn't hold out outside the facility or anything kind of crazy or no chatter or talk or anything like that. And really, you never heard anything bad or negative about Deontay until this past season. So I don't know what changed exactly. Maybe it was the frustrations boiling over from the crap quarterback situation he was in. I don't know. But whatever it was, the team didn't appreciate it and they shipped him out of town. Do we even have the luxury right now of saying that we shouldn't go get whatever receiver gives us a chance to at least complete a damn pass? Russ had 12 completions in this past game. 12. And 128 yards passing. I'm sorry, but the guys like Van Jefferson and Scottie Miller and Mike Williams right now are not going to win you football games. They're not going to be the ultimate deciding factor in this team, which puts a ton of pressure on the running game and a very young offensive line. And I think they're painting this offensive line into a corner right now because teams are just going to continue to stack the box. There is no threat of these guys winning a one-on-one battle with any cornerback in the league right now. Van Jefferson, throughout the entire season, has had the worst separation rate of just about anyone in the NFL. So for those of you who love PFF, and I know there's a number of people out there that do, you can't possibly defend this guy. He's had the worst separation of every receiver in the NFL all season. Week 1, all the way through our current day. Scottie Miller, he should be a slot receiver at best. He should never be on the outside starting or getting significant snaps. When that guy has more snaps in the offense than he does on special teams, there's a big problem. When Ben Skoranek, who's a special teams ace, has more receiving yards than the majority of your roster, that's a big problem. I'll be honest. I feel like this team needs to make a move. I don't know if you want to go get a guy like Odell Beckham Jr., who's seasoned. I'm not even sure how effective he could be at this point. He didn't do anything in Miami. He did have a nice year last year in Baltimore. Showed he can still play a little bit. To be frank, he's probably better than everybody that we have on the current roster that's not injured. But is he a guy you want to bring into the locker room? Because he's had character concerns. I mean, the guys that are available right now are available for a reason. Let's be honest. They're not model citizens and high-end receivers because they wouldn't be on the market if they were. So at some point, if you feel like you want to really take this seriously and make a run, you've got to bury your pride and you've got to go get a guy who's a clear upgrade. And right now, I think this team's going to have to go get Deontay Johnson. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I would go get Deontay Johnson. I would cut Scottie Miller and move on. Because that's where we're at. You cannot play another game where you have this receiving core running around on the field. If you're going to do that, you might as well run 4 freaking tight ends out there and just see if you can bully somebody. Like I said, that's why I knew it wasn't going to work against Philadelphia. But we played a really physical game against Baltimore the first time. We might be able to win that way this time. I don't know. I can tell you right now, I would not be happy about watching Marlon Humphrey versus Scottie Miller. Or a guy like Andrew Wiggins against Calvin Austin. Guy who could run stride for stride with Austin. Trenton Simpson or Roquan Smith, even though they haven't had good coverage grades all year, I thought they actually played Pat Freiermuth pretty well in the first game. I don't feel comfortable about any of this receiving corps at all. This isn't overreaction time. They just suck. And they've sucked all year. Why would we expect anything different when you lose your number one playmaker? I think this team and this organization, who only have one guaranteed year with Russell Wilson, I think they need to get Deontay Johnson the second he's on there. You put a waiver claim in and see if you can pick him up. Never thought I would say that, but this wide receiver group is so embarrassing that it feels like a necessity at this point, and you don't have an option. So the old phrase, beggars can't be choosers, that's exactly where we are. You can't beg for wide receiver help and then hope for something better than Deontay Johnson to come around. As a player, I still think Deontay Johnson is a damn good player. I don't know what the issues were in Carolina, why he never really got going. I mean, he was okay, I guess. Stats weren't great. Why he really his issues seeing the field in Baltimore, I don't know what it is, but he should be able to acclimate himself into this offense rather quickly and rather easily and be a clear upgrade over what we have. And I think that's where the team's at right now. I think if we want to be a serious contender, you got to have more than just George Pickens to throw the football to. I've been saying it all year. I don't care what Arthur Smith's offense has been in the past. Everybody likes to point out the one season with Corey Davis being a 1,000-yard receiver as the second guy, but it was only one season. So I get it. History has said that he doesn't run a very heavy 2-wide receiver system that has effectiveness and success, but I don't care. You've got to have someone on the field that's at least a freaking threat. This is the NFL. You can't run with one guy and expect to win with one guy with any sort of consistency against really good football teams. I can tell you right now, if George Pickens and Deontay Johnson were both on the field in that Philly game, they can't stack the box the same way that they did. Because there would be an actual threat on the outside that they would have to respect. We still wouldn't have beat them. But at least you're giving yourself a chance. We'll see what happens from here. I don't know what the team's plans are. There's no possible way you can tell me that they're comfortable with what they're seeing on the field. No way. You can't watch film the day after this Philly game and watch these guys running around at wide receiver and say, yeah, we're good. Even if George misses just one more week, we got faith. We're good. We'll see what happens. Personally, I think that this game is going to come down to whether or not George Pickens is healthy. Colin and I will, of course, dive into some of that on Friday. Tomorrow, we'll be doing our live session, talking about the Eagles game. We'll probably dive into some other things because there's not going to be a lot to talk about on the Eagles game. It was just bad. So as always, like, share, subscribe. Hope you all have a great Tuesday. We'll see you live on the Wednesday show.